Hello and welcome to the Empowered Learning Podcast. This is your host, Andy Bennetts. On today's episode, we welcome Steve Huff. Steve is a dear friend and mentor to me. He holds a PhD from the University of Kansas. He is a visionary leader and entrepreneur, a compassionate advocate for the underserved, the founder of Mitage, creator of Sparks for Good, and the founder of the company I now own, Interactive Learning. Please welcome my good friend, Dr. Steve Huff.
Good morning, Steve. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing spectacular, sir. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing super good. For those that are listening, we always kind of get on ahead of time before we hit record, just to kind of go through some things. And Steve and I were just, talking about getting ready for the podcast, but also just kind of the history and this kind of stuff. So I mentioned him right before we hit record that this is something I've been looking forward to for a very long time. As soon as we said, hey, this is something we want to pursue. So this has been a long time coming, and I so appreciate Steve for giving me a few minutes of his time to share his passions and his history and his background and kind of how our intertwining journey along the way. So this is going to be a blast. So thank you again.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So I'm sure that in the context of his background, we'll kind of maybe talk about how the two of us met, but let's save that for a little bit later. So for those people that are just getting to know you and tuning in, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, your journey up to this point.
You betcha. Well, I started in college thinking I would be a public speaker or some kind of, that was my major in college, public speaking, but I took a minor in counseling. Okay. And just loved being of service. I started with a inner city youth service program and just fell in love with it, did Young Life for a while, and then decided to do seminary thinking maybe I would be a therapist. I tried that for a little while and decided I hated that, the 50-minute hour and, just talk therapy just didn't do it for me. But I found that I love social work. I love being on the street with people and making a real difference. So I fell in love with that. In my master's program, we were trained in what's called the medical model, which if you're not familiar is kind of assess, diagnose, treat. I'm going to assess your problem, give you a label, diagnosis, and then tell you what you should do. And that's maybe a little simplistic, but it was actually how it went. And then started to burn out on that. I was working in the inner city in Denver. And then I discovered the strengths model out of the University of Kansas, Rock Chalk. And I called Charlie Rapp so many times, who was the originator of that. He said, why don't you just come out and get your PhD in this? Cool. And I said, I'm not an academic. And he said, no, but you'll really learn the model. And I also said, I'm a native Texan. I grew up in not really native, but grew up in Texas. And then I moved to Colorado and married my wife, who was a native Coloradan. Okay. And trying to convince her to marry a Texan, and then he's going to move her to Kansas. I didn't think that would go well. But in fact, my wife, Becky, said she was up for the adventure. So we went out there and I learned that model, the strengths model, which is essentially focusing on what's well with people rather than what's wrong, as a way to promote positive growth and change. And so I did that for about 10, 15 years as a consultant, working with a lot of mental health organizations on how to transform from medical to the strengths. Okay. So that was really my foundation, focusing on what's well in that field. And then I discovered clickers, with the words at e-instruction. That was kind of a funny story where I was actually working for them back in the day in Denton, Texas, and then started working while I was in seminary. Just on the side. And when I started teaching at the University of Kansas, they said, oh, you got to try out these clickers. And I was like, okay, I guess so. And it was just amazing. It just transformed the learning experience to this feedback rich environment. Right. And I really got fascinated with not just the tech, but on the learning, on how it changed from that, just information coming at me to where on a regular basis, the students would be interacting with it. And then how we used it on the screen was the key. What we said, it's not about the clicker. Right. Yep. It's about how the teacher facilitates that interactive experience with that clicker. And so I wrote a couple of white papers on that, and it fell into the hands of some folk higher ups at the military. Right. And they said, yeah, we want you to come out and sell those to us. And suddenly I was a social worker selling education to the technology to the military, which was kind of strange. Right. But just fell in love with it because it was innovation. I think that's one of the primary things I just love is not doing the same old, trying new things. And so that's where you and I met. We got the junior ROTC program and then a lot of K through 12 schools and really focusing on the learning design. I was lucky enough to meet Dan Blair, who was the chief learning officer at the Defense Intelligence Agency. And, my background was not in education. It was in social work. But he really took me under his wing and taught me a lot of the underlying strategies on learning. And we incorporated our technology with his framework. And that's kind of where you and I met.
Absolutely. And it's been an amazing journey ever since. It's been a blast.
Absolutely. For
sure. So the FIT model is one of the papers that he's talking about. And that is the framework that JRTC still uses to this day as to how they create their curriculum and where to ask questions, what questions to ask, the feedback loop. And I love that about that. And that's, you can tell that I'm a disciple of Steve Huff just because the vernacular and the things that we say are very similar. It's not about the clicker. It's about the conversation. It's about a deeper understanding with your audience or your students. So that warms my heart to kind of hear the genesis of this whole thing, because that is the torch, I guess we could say, that I have taken and continued on, from those 12, 13 years ago. It's been a while since we've started this whole thing. Yep.
Maybe one example so that the listeners can kind of anchor what we're talking about in terms of the experience that I always use, because it blends my social work with the learning background. Was imagine, so in early days, we were working with child protection agencies. So my wife was a child protection worker when I was doing homeless outreach. And so imagine that there's a video playing of a child who has bruises, and she's explaining how she got those bruises. And you're the social worker, because the teacher thinks maybe there's abuse going on at home. Okay. So you watch that live interview, and let's say you've got 30 social workers in the room, and they're young social workers. And then at the end of that conversation, they have to make a decision. Do I report this to child protection or not? It's a yes or no question. Sure. So they watch some of the video. At this point, would you report? Yes or no? And then they click in with the clicker. So it's anonymous. Nobody has to be, let's say it's a 50-50 split. Right. And then they say, okay, turn to your neighbor, explain what you put, share with why you put what you put. And then after a 2-minute conversation, now click in again. Right. And you would see the distribution change one way or the other. And then just ask the room, what happened? Why did you change? Now they're teaching each other. They're talking about that metacognitive process, and the teacher just steps back and watches it go. And now maybe you show a little bit more of the video and watch the distribution change a different way. Now explain why you changed. Exactly. And that was the moment when I saw that happen. I was like, oh my gosh, like, how did we ever teach without these things? Exactly. And that is the peer instruction model, right? I mean, for those listening that have maybe never heard about this, that idea of, you teach content, ask a question, and then rather than reteaching it, because if there's a wide disparity as to the answers, right or wrong, the way that you just explained it obviously didn't work. So give an opportunity for them to learn from their peers, peer instruction, ask the same question again. And I agree that was one of my moments where it's like, oh my gosh, this is brilliant. I was a teacher at the time when I first started using clickers, and then I got to working with you, and then my mind was open even further with the deeper application and use for this, not just a quiz thing, but like how can this really impact the students' learning and the teachers' effectiveness and ability to dive in. It's been I'm still very passionate about it, if you couldn't tell. Absolutely. I love it. Super fun. So tell us a little bit about the creation of interactive learning. I know that we kind of talked about, you said that you got in with some JRTC folks. You can name drop a specific wonderful lady that I'm thinking of that you probably are as well. And then kind of, how did you go? Here's better way to ask that question. How did you go from social worker to owning and running an educational technology company, coming up with instructional models of this is how you're supposed to teach stuff? I mean, that seems like, and you're a brilliant guy. I've always thought that, but that's a big leap. So tell us about that journey of going from that to this. Yeah, well, I heard your earlier podcast with Luke TV-Baugh, and that was a fun thing where I was just getting started at the University of Kansas, and he and I met playing ultimate frisbee, and because I was not much of a, I was not a salesman, so having a product that I was then selling felt awkward to me. My father was a great salesman, so maybe I had it in my genes, who knows? But I just loved the product. And he talked about Darren Ward was kind of my coach as well, at instruction on how to sell. And it was just this no pressure. It was like, show the product, it sells itself.
Right.
And then if somebody says no, not at this time, great. Where's the next one?
Right.
I remember Ed Barnes. He got the first big check.
Okay.
Hi, Ed, if you're listening. We should catch up. But I went to the first little sales conference in Denton, Texas, and he got this check, almost like the Publishers Clearinghouse check.
Nice. Yep.
Something like $60,000 or something. I was like,
wow.
Okay. I walked straight up to him and I said, can I take you to lunch?
Yeah. Like, teach me.
How did you do this? I mean, I love the product too, but are you kidding me? And he said, Steve, it's so simple. People make it difficult, but it's just two things. Show the product every day.
Okay.
And he said, that's not a platitude. I mean, every day. Like if it's 4:30 and I haven't shown the product, don't talk about the product, show the product, have somebody experience it.
Right.
He said, if I haven't done it by 4:30, I drive to Starbucks and I put the clickers out on the table, turn on my computer and just sit there and wait for somebody to go, what is that?
Put the
He said,
bait out.
have a seat. I'll buy you a coffee.
I love it.
I mean, it really show it every day because you just never know where it's going to go. It's a product that could be used in a Sunday school classroom. And, like we did the nuclear submarines and the Defense Intelligence Agency, it can go anywhere.
Right.
And then number two, if he said, when you get a sale, celebrate for 5 minutes and then think, where's the next one?
Right. Yeah. That's
Don't sit back and go, that was good. And just lean forward into innovation.
Sure. Yep. Can you, again, I've heard this story, but I think it's an interesting story and I'm sure that this person will listen later. So tell us a little bit about your introduction to Dr. Rice and kind of how that whole thing happened.
Donna Rice. Absolutely. Yeah. So we made a couple of good sales early on. I sold to some child welfare organizations like all of Colorado, New York, and Ohio standardized on the clickers early on. And that was a big check. And suddenly my wife said, maybe you should do another trade show. So like Luke TV Ball on his podcast, I signed up for a military one out in DC. I can't even remember why. But I could remember it was the end of the day. We were there for 3 days. We called ourselves booth rats. You're at the booth doing the 7-minute conversation. And at the very end, everybody else was tearing down their booth. I mean, I think it closed at 4:00 and it was like, 3:15 and everybody's taking their booth down. And I'm like, I paid to be here. I'm standing here. Exactly. Have to kick me out. Right. And it was, all the booths were coming down and here comes Nancy Height.
Oh, yes.
Yes. From Khaki, right? Yes. Walking down the aisle, I can see her. She was looking around at, but people are taking their booths down. And she comes up, what are those? So I explained it to her and she said, oh, you need to meet Donna Rice.
Okay.
Head of Army Junior ROTC. And I said, okay.
All right.
Well, a week later, I think we did an online meeting and she said, I really love that. It's innovative. And Donna was always looking for the next best thing, like you and I. And she said, come on out here. Where was it at the time? Somewhere in Virginia before they had moved, I think. Hampton Roads. And present it to, we do these summer conferences with all of our junior ROTC teachers and come out and show it to them. And I said, okay. And, in the day we had no travel budget. We were Mary Kay reps, right? We put down our $500 and go get them. Yep. But travel was on us. So I explained that to my wife and she said, okay, give it a shot. And the teachers just loved it. And she said, okay, I need you to come back 7 more times throughout the summer, because each time we're going to take a vote on whether the instructors want to purchase this. It's on them. And we'll use your clickers to vote.
I love it.
So at the time I was still running my other, social work consulting organization. So I called Michael Paul. I'll never forget this, at eInstruction, and said, he was maybe the head of sales at the time or something. And said, could you go out here sometimes and do this too? And he said, well, is there a guaranteed sale? And I said, no. After 8 presentations, they'll let us know. And the answer will be either yes for the whole thing or no.
Yeah.
And bless his heart, he flew out there as well.
Did he really?
All these weekends, and I went out some. And at the end, we got the sale, and it was the largest sale that eInstruction had ever got.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. And that was the first domino. That's Army JRTC. The other branches followed suit. You'd already mentioned the nuclear sub, which I think that had happened before I came on with you, and that was just what a cool thing, right? Hey, we're on nuclear subs, and I mean that's a really cool application. Not to go too far back, but just kind of doubling down on the importance and the impact that this has. You mentioned the social work and showing a video. Another one that I remember you kind of training me up on that I used we worked with National Guard for a few years now, a few years back then. And this was always the one that got them. It was a police stop, right? You stopped a truck driver for crazy driving. He gets out of the truck and he slams his clipboard down and say, hey, you're all always picking on our truckers, that kind of stuff. And at different points of this video, you stop and you say, what is your posture at this point? Do you cover down? Do you draw on target? And it's crazy just because everybody has a different take on that.
Yep.
And the conversations that happen because of the pause, because of the anonymity of that, and just having the conversation lead that every single time. That one never missed. That was always an eye-opening experience. So super, super fun. And like you said, so many different applications, everything from early ed to adult ed and literally everything in between. So super fun.
Maybe we should tease that apart, because I think that's another great example. That was the Colorado Springs Police Academy where I first went there, and they had the firearm training simulator was the last part of their course, which where you're actually in a simulated room with a video of, for example, a traffic stop, and the trucker, as you said, gets out and starts yelling, and you pause the video, but they're actually using a simulated weapon at that point.
Oh, wow.
And that's at the end of their 3-month training, maybe longer. And if they fail that, like if they draw too early or they draw too late, they don't make it.
Right.
So we flipped that around and put that at the front. They still did it at the end with the simulator, but with the clicker, and used the same video and just paused it. What would you do with your weapon here?
Yeah.
Nothing, hand on weapon, unclip, low ready, draw on target, squeeze, pull trigger. Those are your choices.
Yep.
And they found out that some early officers or early cadets, candidates, were drawing too early, and some were drawing too late. Those who were playing a lot of Xbox, drawing really soon, and those who were, live it out of fear, not following the protocol, were drawing too late. And then they could differentiate that instruction. Those who were drawing too early, we pull them aside and train them on, what's going on with their adrenaline and why are they choosing to. But the clicker is what allowed that to occur. Yeah.
Right. Yep. I love it. Well, we could spend an entire day talking about the usefulness of audience response systems.
Yes.
But we were still doing that, which is awesome with JRTC and other things. But technology is a fickle thing, and it moves on, and there's lots of new things. And you mentioned earlier that one of your passions is finding new things. And I do want at some point in the conversation just an opportunity for me to kind of personally thank you for my journey, but we'll kind of wrap up with that piece. I guess tell me at what point did you start looking for other things? You ran interactive learning for, like you said, 10 or 15 years. You have a whole team. We're doing good work, and that's going well. But your background and your heart is in social work. And I remember many plane rides and phone calls with you back and forth.
I remember that. We were in Chicago. I remember
Chicago,
that.
exactly right. Dreaming up all of these new ways of how can we make a difference in the world. So tell us a little bit about that. And again, it's gone through lots of iterations, but I know your heart. I know you're always focused on making an impact. So tell the folks a little bit about that.
And now a brief commercial from today's sponsor. Hey guys, Andy Bennetts, owner and president of Interactive Learning. Our awesome little company has been around for close to 20 years now, and our core purpose and mission is to empower the future of education with innovative solutions through engaging technologies and leadership programs. We are blessed to work with a wide range of markets, including K-12, trades, corporate, and government. Interactive Learning is also proud to serve our nation's JROTC programs with over 3,000 units and 500,000 cadets. For our podcast listeners today, we have a special offer just for you. It's called our Class Tech Discovery Session. This is incredibly helpful for teachers, administrators, tech personnel, really anybody involved in helping students learn with technology. Here's what you get with the Class Tech Discovery Session. It starts with a short Zoom call. We'll talk about your class needs, your wants, desires, really your class wish list of ed tech. Then we'll touch on your timelines and budgets, plus any constraints that your district might be facing. Next, we'll look at new tech and new solutions, the latest and greatest out there that might be applicable to you and your district. And if you're interested, We'll even demonstrate these crazy cool, cutting-edge technologies just for you. Finally, we'll give you an idea of costs and professional development and how we and our team will support you moving forward. Again, that is Interactive Learning's Class Tech Discovery Session. Request your session now by texting Discovery to 970-739-2229 or emailing Discovery to andy@intlrn.com. Request your school's highly informative Class Tech Discovery Session today. And now, back to the Empowered Learning Podcast.
Absolutely. So, I'd had a decade or more of doing clickers and just loving it, but my heart really was in organizing and designing and optimizing our internal world.
Mhm.
And, technology did not impact social work as much as it did other fields. And I always felt like it could, but I didn't quite know how.
Okay.
So we created an organization called, or a content called Relafit, short for
Mhm.
relational fitness. Basically, what we were seeing is that technology was engaging the kids. I had two young teens at the time. They're in their 20s now, or 19 and 20. But it was head down in the phone all the time, and nothing good was happening there.
Right.
And there was a lot of complaining about it, but not a lot of design on how to fix it, because they're going to be on the phone.
Right.
So what could they be doing there? And there was stuff for young kids, and then there was stuff for adults, meditation apps and things, but it was that, 13 to 23-year-olds that none of the good content was passing the eye roll test of teens, is what we had said.
Right.
So we came up with this idea of working with TED speakers and other YouTube content creators that were creating really engaging, fun content that was positive, but
Right.
it had not been gamified. There was no really reason for them to do it. There was no incentives.
Right.
So we started started a little tech company to gamify it, and called Sparks for Good was the application, and worked with some great content creators. And so the Relafit content that I created was one of those pieces, but then we worked with Theo E.J. Wilson. We worked with the After School YouTube channel to do that.
That one.
Yeah. And so I was working with Denver Kids, the teen mentoring program here in Denver. And I just got that off the ground. And then it kind of branched off to Carousel, which is a product that everybody should check out if you've got teens, and especially schools, for social emotional learning.
Okay.
That's up and running. So, I've never been much of a tech, designing on the technology platform is not my passion, but creating the concept.
Right.
So that was really fun for me to see Joe Ewing and Carousel take the concept and run with it. So since then, one of the big aha moments I've had is that, as important as personal development is, especially for teens, understanding our internal world, it's really hard to engage a wide variety of teens in something that's actually meaningful to them. So that's what we've been working on now. So the company that I have is called MyTaj, and we're working on something called Soul Map or Soul Build. We haven't decided on the name yet.
Okay.
And then a story that wraps it around it called Hope Club. And everything I do is an acronym, as you know.
Yes, I do.
So HOPE stands for Human Optimization of Personal Experience.
Okay.
So we say, rather than flailing about and hoping for the best, figure out what's going on in here.
Okay.
And then hope for the best, HOPE, all capital.
I love it.
An optimization of personal experience. So it's wrapped around with a story of three little aliens that come from inner space to save humanity from AI.
There you go.
And they're cute little figures. And then they engage with this father and daughter who are on a camping trip to go into their little spaceship. And it's a simulator of our internal world.
Okay.
So, just trying to give it more of a framework and a story context. People, of course, I grew up with Lord of the Rings and next generation Harry Potter. Unless there's a story that wraps around the development of it,
True.
It's just not as sticky. So that's what we're working on now.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. So fun. So fun. Sparks for Good. You had mentioned before we got in that you had kind of a new mantra. I'm not sure if now's the time to unveil that. You mentioned acronyms. I think education has acronyms, military has acronyms, and Steve Huff has his own set of acronyms. So lay them on us.
Okay, absolutely. So I had mentioned that the framework, the visual framework, and it's two stacked hexagons, but then it's a cube. It's a trihexy cube.
Okay.
And we're working on the visual of that right now. But soul is not SOUL, it's capital SOL, which stands for the three dimensions of our inner world, which is our relationship with ourself,
Okay.
Relationship with others, O, and the relationship with life. Mm-hmm.
Self, others, and life.
Yep. So we call that our soul space. So it's this other space that you can't interact with. You can't perceive it with your five senses.
Okay.
But you can imagine it.
Right.
Right. That the power of imagining that space. And of course, that's what, almost every movie, every conversation is about that space. But because we can't manipulate it or sense it with our five senses, it's harder to optimize.
Right.
So how can we give a tool? Well, we create this visual map of what it looks like inside of there. And I can show you more of that later. It's kind of fun. But what we really wanted to do was be able to articulate what is the outcome we're shooting for.
Okay.
Because a lot of times, in personal development, I call it the woo-woo word salad. I love long form podcasts that talk about personal development, but it's just so many words and they just kind of flow around, or Pollyanna platitudes. I call it that. So we wanted to start with what are we really shooting for? And could we actually measure it, even theoretically? So for self, you can erase that, and then I'll show you in the middle. I just wanted you to see the anchoring of those three dimensions. It's peace, belonging, and joy. So PBJ.
Hey, there you go. That's easy to remember.
Yeah. So PBJ versus BLTs. So peace, belonging, and joy. So peace for myself, that I don't feel like I'm battling this inner world and this inner voice. The critic, right? It's not the critic who counts. The daring greatly, Brene Brown. Getting that from Teddy Roosevelt.
Yep.
And then with others, I want to have a sense of belonging. Like I belong to a small group. It's not about fame and fortune. It's about, we call it your 12 players. We use a lot of basketball metaphors because I went to KU, right? Your top 5 players, your starters, and 7 others who are your bench warmers.
Gotcha.
But they're still very important.
Sure.
And that, you want to be very intentional about that team. Are they giving you, and are you giving them that sense of belonging and connection? So we get very intentional about it. And then the joy is in your life, which is what we call your activities.
Okay.
Hobbies, habits, and have-tos. Many people who experience high levels of peace, belonging, and joy found it either by accident or, they just fell in with the right family or the right group of friends. Others kind of flail about a little bit. We just wanted to create a framework where we can go at it with intention and just a lot of fun. We call it SPF, simple, practical, and fun.
There you go.
So that's, so then above it, you can do frequency, duration, and intensity, FDI.
Okay.
So I'll have to give one little story about when I first went to my social work program in my measurement class, which we were all dreading, right?
Right.
Tom, I can't remember Tom's last name, but he was just wonderful. So he says on the first day of class, okay, anything that exists can be measured. If it doesn't exist, if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist.
Okay. Interesting.
And we all looked at each other and we thought, does he think we're in the psychology department? This is social work. We tell stories.
Exactly.
We're warm fuzzy. We're woo woo over here.
Yeah.
He said, but now listen to me. It doesn't mean it's easy to measure, and it doesn't mean you should measure it.
Okay.
But theoretically, you need to be able to articulate it how it could be measured if it could, because that will help the programs that you're working with at least conceptually understand what that means. So that's where we were talking about, that's where that comes from. Frequency, duration, and intensity. Frequency is how often you feel peace. Duration is how long you feel it, when you feel it. And then intensity, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much are you feeling it? Yeah. And the goal is not always to top that out, but the goal is to be able to be aware of the types of activities, the types of people, and the types of thought that create that experience for you.
Gotcha.
Because that's what life is really about, is having those kind of moments and sustaining it. And then at the bottom, it's MLS. So it's myself, then L is loved ones, my close group, and then S is strangers, or, in social work, we call it those we serve. So I run a mobile outreach program that serves the unhoused population in Denver now. And that's the S level, right? So it's always yourself first, because you can't give away what you don't have. Then to your loved ones, right? Being very intentional about your family and your close friends, and then to be of service to even strangers. So that's our fun little acronym of what we're shooting for.
I love it. And I missed the SPF one, but I'm Was it specific? What was SPF?
Oh yeah, simple, practical, and fun. SPF. Yeah, we say, like the world, being out in the world's like being out in the sun, right? It's tough out there. It's cold out there. What is that from Groundhog Day? I love it.
Right. I love it.
It's really, but it's a hot, right? I mean, it's just a hot mess with social media and just the way the politics are today. I can't, that's beyond my pay grade. Not my pig, not my farm, I say, but I can protect myself, my own mind, and my close group, and how I do that.
Right.
And, SPF is like, we try to get our rating up to 50, like sun protection factor.
There you go.
Right? If you've got a sun protection factor of 10 and you're out in the sun all day, you're still going to get burned.
Right. That's very true. That's very true. That's wonderful. I appreciate that. That's, very, very eye-opening and kind of what aspirational work. I love that that you're able to pursue and create. I know you are a creator. We won't get into winning colors, but we for us internal we have these colors that are different things, and Steve is just neon green. He is green because he's a creator and a thought provoker and this kind of stuff. And we are such a good team because we balance that each other out because we had some different skills. But I love that. I'm happy for you, buddy, that you get to continue to develop, continue to create, and make a difference in the world, because I know that's where your heart's at. And I guess that now is as good a time as any. Just wanted to, you'd mentioned the episode with Luke. If you haven't watched that one, go back and watch that one. It's a fun one. He talks about Steve, and obviously Steve is now on the podcast here, but I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you from the bottom of my heart for the opportunity that you gave me rather to come into this world as an educator and trying to figure out, what does it mean to be a salesperson. You took me under your wing, and we got to create and do wonderful things together and work side by side for many, many years. And then you entrusted the company to me to kind of, like I said, pass that torch and can carry that on. And it means more than you will ever know. So I very, very much appreciate all of your support and your love and your undying support of my efforts and everything. So thank you very much, my friend.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You bet. Well, time flies when we're having fun here. So looking at my little grab bag questions, we're not randomizing them anymore because we want to make sure that a question kind of actually fits with the conversation here. So we're going to be a little bit more selective at this point. So let's see here. This is a little bit different one. I know you haven't asked this one in previous episodes. What is your proudest accomplishment? You've lived a very full life. I would think that you would agree with that. Being a dad, being a business owner, entrepreneur, working with social work. You have a beautiful wife, beautiful family. It's hard to rank things, but what would you say is your proudest accomplishment?
Well, I think proud is an interesting word, but I think maybe the one that comes to my mind is most meaningful, or kind of my aha moment was, I was in social work for a long time and in mental health, and it wasn't, I'm 55 now. It wasn't until I was about 46, I think, where I really took my inner world seriously and kind of became aware of it. And I think that was a pivotal moment. I call it my midlife makeover. My wife calls it something else, as you imagine. I just stopped taking myself really seriously, but more my inner world as seriously. I heard the pastor at our church said it recently. She said at the end of her talk about she was doing the Sermon on the Mount, or the Beatitudes. No, the Lord's Prayer. Okay. And at the end it was as on earth as in heaven. And she said this phrase. She said, "The kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven, is more real than the world you wake up to every day."
Wow.
And then she paused and she said, "Let me say it again."
Yeah.
The kingdom of heaven is more real. And that's that, whether you call it heaven or the spiritual world or relational like we do, that world is more real, more important than this world that distracts us of stuff. And it's easy to say, but I didn't actually experience that until I was, in my 40s. And I'm just so glad I didn't really accomplish it. I think it's all grace, but then it just got me really excited about finding ways for other people to have that aha moment, and younger and younger. And so my kids now are just in, their 20s, and I really see their aha moment happening earlier.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's I think that's what every parent wants is, we all are all trying to improve upon previous generations.
Yeah.
If you had a terrible dad, even if you're just an okay dad, you're that much better than the previous ones, and okay dads try to be great dads and so on and so forth. And you want the scripture, right? If you as a father know how to give good gifts, right? I mean, that whole thing.
Yep.
You definitely want that for your kids. And it's there's probably, I mean, talking of proudest accomplishments, that's one of those things of like, if you can see your kids winning at an earlier age and just thriving, what better thing is there, right? So that's fantastic. I'm happy for you.
That's right. And that's a lot of the tools we build is it just says that parents are just outmatched with social media. And
right.
just complaining about it is not going to do anything. We got to give them new tools so they feel like they can fight the battle more effectively.
Right. And people that have listened to other episodes, you've heard me say this before. I probably got it from you, Steve. Is you leverage, you don't limit, right?
Yep.
You can put as many blocks and locks on your kid's phone as you want to. They're going to find a way around it, and at the end of the day, they are going to grow up and be out from under your control. What are you doing to enable them to be able to maneuver life afterwards? So how can you leverage that into a good thing and not just try to stamp it down?
Yeah, and that's our responsibility, yours and mine, as content creators and technology leaders. It's not the parents' job to find those tools. It's our job to build them and then give them, empower the parents to do that. We blame the victim a lot. I think both the kids and the parents are like, well, what should I do? Well, we're working on it.
Right. Maybe we should come up with something that we talk about, empowering learning. I don't know, just a thought.
That would be a good phrase.
You and I can
work on that.
Workshop that guy. All right, I love it. Oh, so much fun. We need to, whether we're recording it or not, you and I need to talk more often, because it's always I always leave conversations with feeling awesome. So, but for the context of this conversation, let's wrap up with our 3 key questions. Everybody on Empowered Learning gets the final 3 questions. So, Dr. Steve Huff, who is the leader that you most admire and try to emulate?
Yeah, it was funny. It was we were playing a game the other day. What was it? It was I'm gonna forget it. But it was where the question came up: who would you like to have lunch with? So it was kind of that way. And I'll say this name that nobody will know probably, but it's Bernardo Kastrup.
Okay.
Yeah, one of my ultimate frisbee buddies turned me on to him about a year ago, and it's really changed my complete thinking. More than allegory is one of his books, but if you're into metaphysics and the study of consciousness, might be worth taking a look at. Analytic idealism is his thing, but he's just completely blown my mind. Back to that kingdom of heaven thing of just that consciousness and the relational space is more real and more important than the physical stuff that catches our attention, and why that is, and how we can change that, how we can actually get into our internal world and make a difference. So Bernardo Kastrup, and he's just such an authentic human being and just so humble. He has 2 PhDs, one in computer engineering and one in philosophy.
Wow, that's
so that's a cool combination, kind of like mine with having a tech background and social work. He's kind of got that from both sides.
I love it.
Yeah, Bernardo, right? I'd love to have lunch with him sometime.
Right? How do you spell his last name?
Oh, it's with a K. Kastrop. Yeah, I actually have one of his books right here. The new one I'm going to start. Science Ideated.
Kastrup. There we go. I'm glad I asked, because I was waiting. Kastrup. All right. Very good. Awesome. Question number 2 for you, sir. What learning, we're at the beginning of 2024 right now. So looking back on 2023, you are a constant innovator. You're constantly learning. I love that about you. Looking back on 2023, what was the learning that most impacted you?
Yeah, so Kastrup was one of them, but I'll flip this one over to Dave Snowden. Okay. Snowen. And his framework is called Cynefin. So another hard one, but this is a Cynefin, the Cynefin framework. He's Welsh, and that is a Welsh word meaning our many places of belonging, or something like that.
Okay.
It complete just in a nut. It's just 4 quadrants. It's very simple, but the 4 types of problems we experience is simple, complicated, complex, and crisis. And the main aha moment is that in the world of social work and in our internal world and in learning as well, it's a complex problem, not a complicated one. Complicated is like launching a rocket in space and landing back on Earth.
Right.
The complicated problem, meaning all of the variables are essentially known. We just have to test it and retest it and come up with best practices until we learn how to do it well.
Right.
That's in the physical space. But in our internal space, it's a complex problem. For example, parenting.
Yeah.
It's a very different type of problem where the main tools we have are stories. He's got all these principles like the adjacent possible, an estuary map. So we use a lot of Snowden's framework, the Connevin, in the work that we do with working with unhoused individuals in Denver. It's not a complicated problem. It's complex. So hopefully that'll plant a seed. Some people will go check out his framework. It's very, very good.
Very good. Very good. And just, we're fast forwarding in future. We have created something about empowering learning. It's called this podcast. So our final question there, Steve, how would you empower learning for future generations? You live a very full life. You've got so many more, wonderful things ahead of you. You've got kids. You're working with, population that is underserved and is misunderstood, I'm sure, probably. And you want to, help them, but also other folks. So how would you empower learning for future generations for all those folks?
Yeah, lots of ways we could address that. I'll do a real simple one. This was one of the little, in my team meeting, we always start off with the icebreaker question. One of it was what class should be mandatory for middle school and high school kids that's not currently?
Yep.
So some people were saying financial literacy, other people were saying social media training, sex ed, which I guess is still mandatory, I guess. But I said teaching about our internal world. There's some really good innovations going on out there, but we have to be teaching it in a way that is passes the eye roll test. It's got to be simple, practical, and fun to where they look forward to taking it, not with the eye roll. And that's tricky. Right. Nate Thompson, I know the head of Littleton Public Schools, is working on a curriculum that he home built there at the school called Mental Notes that I think is leaning toward that. Why Try is a great one out of Utah, where they're using imagery to show that. That's really worth looking at. Carousel, obviously. If you look that up. But I think teaching at earlier age, not just mental health. I think the word mental health we should push a pause on that, because when you hear the word mental health, you think mental illness. You just can't help it.
Right.
You think of decreasing anxiety or decreasing depression. I think we need to be elevating flourishing and wellness, peace, belonging, and joy. PBJ.
Right. I love it.
And how we do that, I think we will. I think it's coming. And everybody's going to be like, finally.
Right.
Why did it take you so long? We said, well, we were a little behind the curve when social media came out. We didn't see that coming.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, Steve, thank you again so much for this time. Thank you for your insights and your wisdom, for your mentorship and your friendship throughout the years. It's meant so much to me, and I have no doubt that this conversation will impact others. And so, thank you again for your time. Love you. Appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me just say thanks back to you, but also I'm just so not proud, but I am proud, but I'm inspired that on top of everything else you're doing, you made the commitment and you took the bet, right, to say, I'm going to make a podcast and get out here, because there's so many podcasts out there. So many people would sit back and go, yeah, maybe I'll do it someday, but you made it happen. And this right here is worth every minute. I feel very inspired.
I appreciate that. Well, a very influential person in my past has challenged me to find things that I'm passionate about and pursue those and make a difference. So in large part, it is due to your influence. So I appreciate you, buddy.
Love you, buddy.
All right, buddy. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.